Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Another crypto conference. The best one in Israel, some might say. So wait, I'm inviting the rest of the guys, yeah?
You're inviting the rest
All
of the
right. So let's do it by the order of what you guys said. So I guess the first guy I'm inviting on stage is Jeremy. Is he here? Yes. How's it going, Jeremy? Woo! How's it going? In a second, they're all gonna, present themselves. Do you remember we met like at with Genesis DAO back in like 20? Yeah.
Forget a handsome face.
Yeah, back in 2017, in the right before the previous bear market. Anyway, next one up, Shira. Amazing. How are you, Shira?
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. Eli, welcome, Eli, on stage.
Woo!
Yes. These are some of the, the guys shaping sort of like the Israeli and, Jewish crypto community. And Yonatan, last but not least.
Woohoo!
How are you? Good morning. Good morning. So we're missing one mic, I guess. But yeah, how are you guys?
We have another mic.
Yeah, but he's missing one, no? Yeah. Sharing. All right, guys. So, I guess good morning to everyone and welcome to the first panel of, the ICC. We have a big crew a big and important crew of people who are going to be talking today. And I guess we can start with just each one presenting themselves. What are you guys doing right now? And yeah, maybe a word or two about why are you even in this ecosystem?
Sure. Boker Tov. My name is Jeremy Epstein. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at RDX Works, which is the company responsible for building the Layer 1 DeFi protocol known as Radix. We are the inventor of the world's first programmable DeFi engine, and we've solved the scalability issue without breaking composability. So worth over $1 billion, although it depends on the day. I've been in the space for about 6 years now, and like everybody here, there was a moment where I was like, oh shit, this thing's a tsunami of disruption and basically no one sees it coming. I've spent 25 years in the intersection of technology and marketing and haven't been on the Web 1 and the Web 2 revolutions. I recognize what happens if they go to their natural progression, which is we all live in a Chinese surveillance state. That's not acceptable for me. It's not acceptable for my children. So I've devoted my life to trying to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Woo! Welcome. Shira?
That's a good answer. Yes, I'm Shira. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Redefine. We are a young startup in DeFi focused on risk assessment and risk mitigation for users. So we cater to hedge funds, CFIs, family offices, institutional investors. Been pretty early on in this space. I bought my first Bitcoins when they were $200 each, still holding. That was, I think, late 2012, early 2013. And when my co-founder, Eylon, who's here somewhere, and I wanted to do something in DeFi, specifically, we kind of looked around. We were very much into the ideology and about giving equal access to financial services. Specifically, Redefine, the E and the F, they actually have the equal marks in our logo to kind of remind us always what are we here for. And there are many things to do on DeFi, and we're going to talk about it today. But for us, it suddenly kind of dawned on us that it's very natural for us to, since we both worked at government, the Israeli government, doing different cybersecurity, let's call it projects, we figured that this mix of cyber and crypto is something we can actually use in order to help DeFi grow and help enhance the security of the space. So this is what we do at Redefine.
Amazing. Eli?
Hello, good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Eli Bejerano. I'm the CEO and co-founder of B2C. B2C is the company that is responsible on the fact that Israel has its own exchange in Israeli Nice, and working over 9 years with the Israeli banks and Israeli regulators. Let's go back to the question. I'm in the space for 11 years, 9 plus 2, yeah, 11 years. And I'm here because I was familiar before that with the traditional financial system, how the money works inside the computers of the banks, how actually money moves. And when I found out about Bitcoin, there was no crypto in 2011, I got rug pulled, right? The floors moved beneath my feet. And my greatest professional ability is to take this dream. Okay, my profession before crypto was a QA manager. I'm supposed to ensure the quality of the software. And we decided that we need to bring the dreams and the ambitions and our ideology to the ground, bring it to the feet, and see how we can collaborate with the regulators, with the mainstream finance thinking, and we're still doing it till today. And I'm suppose I'm here because it's happening, and someone has to make the bridge between what we think is going to happen, between what's happening and what was happening.
Amazing, thank you.
Awesome, great to be here. My name is Yonatan. I'm a partner at SquarePeg. We're a $3 billion VC that invests in a bunch of different things, including crypto, which is an area I lead at the fund. I've been building and investing in crypto since 2014, started as a VC at Venrock in New York, but spent most of my career as a builder, built 3 companies. One of them was a B2B company that was sold. Another was a B2C company that really felt that grew very strongly until it felt the problems with Web 2 of kind of the data monopolies and what that enables for the biggest players in tech today. And from there, and being very enthusiastic about crypto for a few years, I decided to start a crypto company that was intended to bring some of the concepts of user ownership into the world of Web 2 apps. So kind of tokenizing apps and bringing user ownership to the masses. The company is called Props, and we've built it for a few years. About 2 years ago, I came back to Israel, and over the years invested in many crypto projects, mostly as an angel, and also in the open markets, and really excited about starting to see a lot more crypto activity here in Israel. And today I meet many founders every week that are building in crypto, and I'm looking to finance the ones building the most interesting things. And so excited for this panel, and it's really great to see kind of the crypto community coming together here. So great to be here.
Thank you. So I'll say a few words about myself. My name is Eylon. I've been sort of into this ecosystem since 2016 when I heard about the DAO hack. Before that, I used Bitcoin for certain things, but yeah, I didn't really know what Bitcoin was. And then, yeah, since then I had a startup. I advise startups. Kind of like my entire world revolved around startups. Also worked with a few. And then about 1.5 years ago, actually, after talking to Yonatan, I decided to make that crossover to investing from building. And yeah, now I'm with Collider Ventures, also investing and trying to push this ecosystem forward. And yeah, shall we start, guys? How are you feeling?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I guess the first question is, what is decentralization good for? What is it not good for? Anyone wants to take it? Yeah, Eli?
Sure, I'll take it.
Yeah?
I see the decentralization as a human superpower, right? It's like airplanes made us the ability to fly, cars made us the ability to travel fast. And even robotics and drugs, whatever is connected to technology makes the individual human more powerful and more free. I totally believe that freedom is one of the goals of every human. So if we have the evolution of the technology that is called internet, we have phase one, when we all had the ability to look at the same information. There was a site, there was an information at the site, we all logged in and watched the same information. The second phase of the internet, we all saw what everyone else is thinking, right? With Facebook and forgot about the word. The social networks, right? The social networks gave us the ability to comment, and everyone, there's an info page, there are comments of other people, and other people can watch those comments and reply for those comments. And in my perception, the next stage is the ownership of that knowledge. Not only what you read, not only what you comment or reply, you actually own some of the content you have online. And for me, it's very important, it's very connected to freedom, because now we live in a world that if your online identity is at risk, you are at risk. We have some examples from Canada, of course, from China. We can talk about this a little bit later, but the fact is, if you delete someone's Gmail and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, he stops to exist online. And this is, I think, very, very scary from the point of view of what centralized companies on web can do to us against what power can we have as individuals against those companies.
Yeah, I'll add to that in a way, the first phase of the internet was about decentralization, open protocols. They've reached a certain scale, but then as soon as an application layer has been built on top, that has the opposite impact of centralization. So today, you have a few platforms controlling a lot of the personal data that we all have, and that means that they can also cut access, both for developers and for users. So whether you like it or not, the President of the United States was basically cut out of one of the biggest mass communications platforms because of a single person's decision. Recently, we almost saw Elon Musk, which many of us love, but it's kind of crazy to think that one person can have private ownership over, mass communication means. And if you think of what this whole movement is about this ability to take and bring back open source to the forefront in a way that's open and community owned, rather than a way where the data is aggregated by specific aggregators that become stronger and stronger the more they grow. So I think that's the biggest characterization of this thing. And in many ways, blockchain technology is far less efficient than centralized technology, at least today, and probably for the foreseeable future. But it has this one killer feature, which is it's not controlled by a single entity. So in a way, there's some great centralized companies and decentralized companies operating in this space, and there's different things that you need to do in the application layer, in the protocol layer, et cetera, and we'll probably get to that. But that basic idea of why are we all here, it's because we're doing things that are more inefficient, more expensive, have a lot of issues, a lot of hurdles. If you're building in this space, you understand the difficulty of overcoming these technical, regulatory, perception, and other hurdles. But the key reason to do that is, I think what Jeremy started with, is what kind of world do we want to live in, and where do we want power to be? And I think absolute power corrupts absolutely, in a way. That's a famous saying, and I think whether people have amazing intentions at the get-go, what happens with centralization is ultimately ends up not being great for the general public. So that's why I think we're here.
Thank you. Shira, you want to add?
Yeah, maybe I just want to say, I feel like decentralization is not sacred per se, so I think it's a mean to an end, and I think Yonatan just described that, and I think we always should ask, what's the alternative? And at least when we look today, decentralization is much better than the alternative, and in a way, it's kind of like democracy, right? Is it perfect? No, I mean, check out Israel right now, it's one big mess. But it is so much better than the alternative, and we will protect it, right? Because we think it's super important. I think decentralization we should kind of treat the same way. It brings about amazing things in terms of equal access, in terms of being permissionless, letting everybody the right to participate, not letting anyone exclude anybody else. There's so many good things that we're probably going to discuss. And I think, yeah, there are costs, and it's wasteful sometimes. But as I said, so is democracy, right? You also need to pay for soldiers and tanks and whatever to protect other things. So I think this is a cost that is, the benefit outweighs the cost substantially. And this is why this is something that we should definitely aspire to, but also always ask ourselves, what are the alternatives now? How much we're paying for this? What is the cost? And as long as the answer is the way we see it today, yes, this is something that is still the best option out there, we should fight for that.
Wait, so is everything in crypto decentralized? This kind of brings me to the next
First
question.
of all, no, but
And should it be decentralized?
Yeah, I was wondering if this is what you want to ask. First of all, I think decentralization is not, it's not binary, right? It's not either it's decentralized or not decentralized. Honestly, I think the question should be how decentralized is it, right? Even like the DAOs that are apparently fully decentralized, we as a security company, we see it all the time when there are attacks on platforms, DAOs, and oftentimes the attack will come from a very Web 2 classic attack on their centralized weak spot, right? Their front end, the website, wherever they hosted it. So clearly they do have also something that is centralized, and it's fine. I think it's something to aspire to. Personally, when we started our company, like I really wanted to be decentralized, right? Because we're in DeFi, and I wanted the token, and I wanted to be, communicating with the community. Those were really important things. But at the end of the day, at least for now, our decision is to be centralized. We are a centralized entity. And I think sometimes it's correct. I'm happy to explain specifically for us, and then, I'm sure everybody has their own opinion. But for us, in terms of security, I've been watching way too many heist movies growing up. It's like my favorite genre. And you know how in the movies, the first part is always about getting the information, right? Before you break in the bank, you need to recruit someone from within, and you want to see what is the safe that you're going to be encountering, right? And how many guards they have, and how much time it takes for the police to come, and do they have a retinal scanning, and whose eyeball you need to get, right? So it's half of the job to do that, and only later you can really plan the heist. So I feel the same way about attackers. At Redefine, when we look at attackers, when we're trying to identify who are we facing, we ask a lot of questions. We have like an automated engine that asks and answers many questions, both online and off-chain and on-chain information, and just handing all those questions. Being decentralized means being also transparent, putting our code out there, telling everybody exactly what we do. Is it a smart thing to do when you're doing security? I'm not sure, right? Because it's like handing them all the information, like the test, right? And now let's see if you pass. So certain things are very difficult to pass, even if you know what you're being tested for. But certain things are easier to pass if you know exactly what are the questions. So I feel like they should do the whole work, right? They should do, like in the heist movies, they should do all the work. I'm not going to make it easier for them.
Security by obscurity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah? Do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's stuff at the application layer that probably shouldn't be decentralized because the type of user experience that you can get to is just not going to be good enough, and for other reasons. I think the core idea of the insistence of something like the Ethereum ecosystem and some other protocols to keep the base layer, the layer one, as decentralized as possible, or decentralized to a certain degree, has a lot of importance because ultimately a lot of the underlying data sits there. So the power structure means that if you have a very decentralized underlying layer where data ownership is in a way tied to users and not to a particular company that's profit-seeking or has its own incentives, that creates a lot of power because even if applications at the layers above are centralized, there's checks and balances because ultimately, the reason why it's so hard to compete with a Facebook or a Google or others is predominantly because so much of the data sits there. So if you're able to keep that layer public, almost like a public good, and access to that layer, and enable easier transition between platforms for people, then the applications on the layer on top, the share of revenue or the share of profit that they would have will be limited. The amount of extraction of the consumer surplus that they can take, their power will be in check. And that's why I think it's key to keep the underlying layers decentralized to a large degree, even if a lot of the things that are going to be built on top are going to be centralized services.
Yeah, and you know, to continue off of that, I guess these layers are also open source, and so anyone can see the code, anyone can decide if they want to compete, essentially, with these systems, fork them, and, you know, compete with the original. So that kind of brings me to, you know, the next question, like, so what's the difference between, you know, sort of these old systems, these old platforms, these Web 2 platforms, and, you know, these new ones, these Web 3 ones, if they're not immediately fully decentralized? Do you want to go for it, Chairman?
I'd say the difference is where you place your trust, right? At the end of the, for me, this whole thing comes down to risk and optionality. Like, we're all in this room, without getting too political and touching US politics here, like, we're all pro-choice, right? But we're pro-choice about our lives. We want to have as many options as we can, and we want to, the risks that a centralized organization has, or that has to us, is by assuming greater and greater amounts of control. So for me, like, this whole thing is about giving people exposing people to as little risk as possible, and giving them as many options. And when you start having a centralized entity of any kind, I think Yonatan said it beautifully, like Yonatan quoted beautifully. Great quote there, man. You know, that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So anytime you have a centralized entity, it's going to go in that direction. So I think we have to be cognizant and aware of that. So for me, this is about, the whole thing comes down to how much risk are you willing to take and expose yourself to.
I think it's already happening even in the world nation geo thing, right? We had like a couple of months ago, Biden said the US is going with blockchain technologies. We are going to be in front of crypto, and the other countries like China or even Russian, or I don't remember the other country, but they're saying they're going through to the direction of a CBDC, right? CBDC is the opposite of you owning something. You will own nothing. And this is a great, I think it's like, it's not really about radicals. It's like most of us are in the middle and we don't really understand what's happening. But in every society, you have some, like us, that are looking forward, and we're thinking about what you said about our children and our grandchildren, and we need to decide in which light are we going to be, and are we going to be on the bright light or in the dark light, or with no light. So eventually I think this is the technology reflects our evolution in this area. We are starting to think more about the freedom and the individual, and less about a mother country or a superior ideological mindset, let's call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add one thing. I think, just to give an example of very concrete, what that power dynamics translate to. So if you think of the revenues that content creators make on something like Facebook, it's negligible. It's, I think, you know, single-digit or less % of the revenue that Facebook actually generates. If you think of what content creators make on YouTube, it's about 50% of some of the revenue, or let's say roughly 50% of the revenue. If you think of what happens when an artist puts their content not on these very large centralized platforms that basically have the power in the power dynamic, but actually puts it on a blockchain and distributes it as an NFT, that's where the percentage becomes in the 90s. And it's quite absurd that NFT creators have created, like people creating NFTs have made more money last year than all the content creators on Facebook combined. And we're talking about, less than a couple million people versus 2 billion people. And so that's staggering, and I think that's a clue to what kind of power dynamics we could hope to enjoy if this Web3 revolution comes to fruition. Now, there's lots of pitfalls and a lot of kind of negative directions that you can go to, but that's a different thing. And just one comment on that is that there's kind of two things here. Some of us are talking a lot about decentralization and through the lens of the internet giants. That's one thing, and the other is when you think about countries and the geopolitical information, the control that governments exert on people. These two are different concepts. They're enabled through the same technology. The same thing that enables you to have a decentralized database that holds user data without a centralized entity is the same one that enables you to create money that's not created by a particular entity. But the level of revolutionary thinking or the level of resentment that you're going to hit when you try to climb each one of these mountains differs, and the weapons that each kind of entity at the top of these mountains has are very different. So I think that's another thing to talk about later.
Yeah, I'll just throw in, I'm very proud to be an American, but I find it offensive how so many people feel entitled to have the dollar as the global reserve currency and basically export inflation and just assume everyone's just gonna just take it. It's just not right, and I find it offensive. And so I feel like, yes, there's gonna be a huge, huge pushback, and it's already happening to that because obviously there's a lot of good when you have the number one currency on the planet, but it's a problem and it's not fair to the rest of the planet.
And we're starting to pay the bill now.
You sure are. You sure are.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like, those are really big things, but even just look at the trivial things, the daily things that drive us nuts in the system. We have this game that I play with my co-founder often. It's called This Would Not Have Happened on DeFi. And the way to play it is when you get screwed again by the bank system, and you just, at the point where you're really discouraged and you don't know what to do, the first person who says that, he's the winner, right? And it happens to us way too often. So here is an example from yesterday. So we have, we raised a lot of money. We have like $15 million sitting in the bank, but I hit my limit on my credit card. It's like 20,000 shekel, and I can't get the bank to to give me more balance. And I tried, and it's not easy. And I called my CFO and I said, I want access to my money. And he said, oh, it's a problem because of Dutch Strom. And I was speechless. I'm like, I don't know how to continue the conversation. And Eylon, unfortunately, beat me to the punch, and he said that would not have happened on DeFi. So he won, but I'm sure we'll play again soon. So.
Yeah, so I think maybe I will also add a few things. I think, we talked about, the banking system, right? And, maybe Bitcoin is sort of the first cryptocurrency that has found product market fit, right? And, if you compare this to the current banking system, for example, the rules that the Shira Arison or the Offer family, the rules that they're playing by is not the same rules that you play by, right? And it's someone is wearing clothes and we are naked in the eyes of the system. And so something that's happening like with Bitcoin now, everybody's naked. Everybody has the same rules. Everything is transparent, and it's an equalizer first and foremost. So that's kind of something interesting in that regard. Yeah, maybe we can move on to, I guess you're also you're bringing me to the next question. So what are the challenges, faced by some of the startups operating in this space? In Israel, let's say specifically, I guess we have 2 startup people who are based in Israel. I had a startup in Israel. It was, yeah. If you say anything if you say crypto, then, you don't get a bank account. Basically.
Definitely. Today,
I was going to say, I'm going to let Eli answer it, because you're facing regulation, so you probably have the hardest time.
All the time. I'm facing it all the time. Almost 10 years. But I have a different perspective, right? From where I'm coming from, this is inevitable. right? When I talk to the banks, I'll tell them, right, you can block now, you can demand some more papers, you can have some more clarity, we can change some rules, right? But this is happening. This is not something that we can look over and hope it will go away. Also reference to the dollar issue, right? This is happening, and we need to deal with it, right? And the way I see to deal with it is to bring all that interpretation and the imagination and the ideologically, bring it down to the earth and face with it. Face with it. If you need to pay tax, you need to pay tax. If you need to bring a piece of paper, you need to bring a piece of paper, because this is the way we're going to move forward, with talking with the regulation and convincing them that we have no choice. This is the only way we are going to move forward, and I'm happy to say that I see a bright pink future, right? For every person that is 60 or 70 that is telling me you are talking bullshit, there are about 50 or 100 children that are buying crypto, right? They don't care about policies. They don't care about... I imagine my grandchild will ask me, why did you keep money in the bank from the beginning, right? It's your money. Why give it to someone else? So it's a change of perspective. I think it's inevitable, like the genie is out of the bottle. The younger kids that are starting to interact with money, they started in very early age because of the networks, of the society networks, and the boundaries are getting lower, and I think it's gonna be great. It's like there's another quote, how it goes: first they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then they will join you. Yeah, then you win.
Yeah.
I got a good story that I think you'll like. So my 9-year-old nephew, I helped him set up a helium node, and
that's my point, man.
Within 3 minutes, the guy got like crypto economics, and then he also set up a Mysterium VPN node, and he started sending money on Polygon, and I'm like, you're 9. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Now ask him if he wants to go with his apotropos to open a bank account and sign some documents.
Yeah, he's so past that. You're right. I mean, I saw a great tweet the other day that applied to DeFi, but could apply to decentralization about inevitability. It said the difference between TradFi and DeFi is that TradFi runs on suits, DeFi runs on code. And once you get your head around that, you're like...
They understand it.
They get it, yeah.
Fast,
I think also this is an area, because you're dealing with value transfer, you're dealing in the areas of money, you're touching the edges of securities law. There's a lot more sensitivity to it by regulators. And I think whereas the ethos of Web2 startups was move fast and break things, I think in crypto you still want to move fast, and hopefully you don't get to break things like Terra and Luna, but you basically want to proceed with awareness to the legal framework you're operating within, because sometimes you would do things, you can put something in the hands of users, and because, for example, you're putting a token in the hands of users, you no longer necessarily have control over it. There's a lot of actions that are tough to reverse. So when you're building in this space, and hopefully a lot of the people here are builders, I think more so than in Web2 building, you have to think, to keep regulation in mind all the time, and kind of work with strong legal advice when you do that, because it's riskier in that regard. But there's also a whole canvas and a full world and many unicorn companies that have been fully legally built within the space. It's just important to keep that in mind.
So maybe a quick last question. We're talking about decentralization. How does a startup building here in Israel, or in generally anywhere in the world, how does it become decentralized? Like, what is the path? Like, do you wanna?
Yeah, sure. I think if there's a some companies are centralized and are going to stay centralized. For example, if you're a B2B company helping other companies interact with crypto networks, you might be a centralized company. If you're an application that maybe interacts with decentralized networks but is essentially like a fintech startup, like a CeFi startup, then like a Coinbase, for example, then you're also building you're building a centralized company that operates in and interacts with a decentralized protocol. But sometimes you're going to be building a decentralized protocol that's essentially an open source network coordinated through a token without a central entity that governs it. But wait a minute, you're just a couple founders sitting in the room and talking about building that decentralized network. So obviously right now you're a company, maybe you want to raise capital through equity or through other means, and maybe you have a bank account because you need to pay rent or you need to pay salaries, and we just talked about like talking to a lawyer. So who is that lawyer talking to? He's not talking to a decentralized entity. He's talking to you two. And you have a company, probably. So there's this whole notion of a path to decentralization. And ultimately, it's a group of people building an open source project that over time gradually moves towards decentralization. And there's a whole set of criteria of what makes something decentralized or not. But I think it's important to recognize that if you are building something decentralized, there's over a timeline. You need to release code a certain way and move towards having more and more nodes operating in the network, etc., so that ultimately you end up in a decentralized place like where Ethereum is today. It's very rare to see something like Bitcoin that starts off decentralized.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin didn't start decentralized either, right?
Right.
But I will just add a few more words to this. There is, Yonatan talked about using the token to decentralize, and many crypto startups are, okay, we're going to issue the token, but that doesn't work. You have to build something, you have to build a product, you have to get to product market fit, and then, the token helps you sort of like grow and decentralize at the same time, give ownership to your community. And I think one of the most dangerous things to startups in the space is to issue a token too early. And yeah, I guess we will end with that because look, Kesem is already giving me the look,
Sorry, what can I do?
We're over time. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.